Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the World Class Waffle podcast. This week we come to you for episode 16 of our wonderful podcast, hosted by your three, and I can say it this week, your three favourite student podcasters. John returns for this week after his absence last week, and we are delving into some of the sporting world's finest stories. This week we feature three different sports again. One as repeated from last week, but two new sports. Football makes an appearance again, as did last week, through our reaction to the England squad and any notable absentees or inclusions within it. We're also going to be discussing cricket and a development of specifically women's cricket in the UK and further afield. And finally, we're going to be diving into rugby union and summing up the Six Nations, which will be drawing to a close on Friday this coming week, when France play Scotland. So, as we are limited for time on Zoom, let's dive straight into things as the World Class Waffle presents football.
Now I'll be bummed. Oh, it's an equaliser.
And the football story in question, as mentioned previously, is the England squad to face San Marino, Albania and Poland. And there is some notable inclusions, but also some notable absentees. And I think the notable absentees probably outweigh the notable inclusions.
This is a difficult one, isn't it?
It is indeed. So let's just run through some of the notable inclusions that have been included in Southgate's 23-man squad. Obviously, there's no Jordan Pickford due to injury. The injury he picked up against Burnley in the Premier League. So Sam Johnston makes an appearance in the England squad for the first time, the England senior squad for the first time. And I'd say that's fully justified. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, the fact he made my Premier League team of the season shows that he deserved of his spot. And if you didn't see our Premier League team of the season predictions, go and look back at episode 14, where we talk for an hour about just said topic. Luke Shaw makes an appearance back in the squad, which is fully justified again.
Yeah.
Fully justified.
English Roberto Carlos.
Close. Jesse Lingard also makes a reappearance. And again, his form for West Ham, being on loan from Manchester United, has been very, very good. And I think he's fully justified of his position back in the England squad, because he's helped push West Ham even further forward than what they already were, because they were already having a brilliant season before they signed Lingard. And arguably that was there wasn't many signings in the January transfer window, but I think that signing for West Ham was probably the signing of the January transfer window.
Yeah. Someone's going right with West Ham transfer business in the last 18 months.
It makes a change. Ollie Watkins up front, again, a good inclusion. He probably deserves his spot in the England squad. But there's other strikers out there that you probably could argue could have got in there. There's one that we'll probably discuss in a bit more detail once we've gone through all the notable inclusions, and that's Eric Dyer, because I don't think any of us can understand how he still gets in that England squad. Seeing as there's other centre-backs, arguably, that have performed better than him this season. And the other two are Jude Bellingham, who's been included again at the age of 17, and obviously John Stones makes a reappearance into the squad, which, again, fully justified.
Yeah. Not many you can argue with, really, is there?
I think the only one that could really be argued is Eric Dyer, that's been included. But
yeah, I would have
again,
put Lewis
he is a
Dunk in
Southgate
there.
regular.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, like you said, Ben, seems to be many more centre-halves who have been on better form. And I mean, that's something that I've always found with Southgate in a lot of recent squads, is that if Eric Dyer is fit, then he seems to go there. No, so it doesn't really matter how well. There's people like James Tarkowski can't even get a look in. Like John said, Lewis Dunk, no, never anywhere near a squad. How will he play? I mean, this one as well. Michael Keane's arguably the best form he's had since he's been at Everton. Have been unbelievable all season, especially the last couple of months. And Eric Dyer's in instead. I think, and the fact that Eric Dyer is not even a centre back as well. He's a midfielder by trade. But Mourinho plays him centre half, and so does Southgate, which then means he gets in other people who actually play there properly.
I think the only saving grace for Eric Dyer is his utility, his ability to play as a defensive midfielder, but also as a centre back. But like you said, Rob, there is other centre backs from the Premier League and even abroad. That there's two that I've written down from abroad that arguably have had much better seasons than Eric Dyer, because Tottenham, quite frankly, yes, they've got to the League Cup final, but it's not been a good season, as their Europa League performance in midweek practically summed up their season.
Yeah, shout out Joe Hart.
Yeah, interesting from Joe Hart, his comments made on social media. But I'm just gonna say the ones that, well, there's 5 centre backs I've written down here that I think should be in instead of Eric Dyer. James Tarkowski from Burnley. There's no bias there at all. I just think
we agree with you. I
think he's just been a better centre back for Burnley. You could even argue Ben Mee, but I think Ben Mee's getting to that age now where he's probably going to be overlooked for an England call-up. As Rob said, Lewis Dunk. How he's not had an England call-up yet, I do not know. Michael Keane was one I didn't actually write down, but I put another Everton centre-back down in Ben Godfrey. But I think he's got into the under-21 squad, if I'm right.
Yeah, he's in the under-21 championship squad, yeah.
But I think he could have been worthy of a senior call-up, if I'm completely honest. And then
I think the under-21 squad got called up, got announced a week before the England team.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
But I think he'll be fine in the under-21 squad, and he'll probably be a senior figure in there, but he could well be in the senior squad. And the other 2 centre-backs that I wrote down, there's 3 other players after that. The other 2 aren't actually from the Premier League. They're both playing in Italy at this moment in time, and they are Chris Smalling and Fikayo Tomori.
Tomori's had a good season at AC Milan.
He has indeed. And I think both of them are fully justified to be in the squad. But again, Southgate overlooks them.
Out of all the people that you've said, out of all the players that you said that are alternatives to Dyer, the number 1 candidate for me is Tomori.
I'd say Tomori's definitely up there with his pace.
Because he's had
youthfulness.
such a good season with AC Milan, and like to actually go on loan to a big club like that, at such a young age, as well, like being English, playing in a foreign country, like he's really like stepped up to the mark and justified the move and done well.
I think it'll be interesting to see if he is part of Thomas Tuchel's plans next season at Chelsea.
He's got to be, because
Thiago Silva,
yeah,
he'll probably be in his last season next season. I mean, maybe even this season, because he only signed a 1-year deal with Chelsea.
It may not be down to Thomas Tuchel's choice as well, because I think there is an option to buy in that loan deal, and AC Milan are very much interested in signing him permanently.
Yeah,
that'd be a good move for him.
Yeah,
that'd be a great move for him.
I think he'd thrive there. I mean, we've seen Chris Smalling completely revive his career going to Italy, playing for Roma, and I think Tomori could do the same.
And I weren't even annoyed about him leaving. Like he was out there in United frame for a very long time. He weren't getting a look in. He weren't even getting like reserve game time. He was just, in the wilderness, just like Lingard, basically. Yeah. And he's gone there, and he's had a absolute worldie of a season. That's why they signed him on a permanent deal, and he's, not look back. So I applaud it. I
mean, if I was to pick the one centre back that I would have had instead of Eric Dyer, I'd have gone for Lewis Dunk.
Yeah,
but I could also make a case for Connor Cody not being in that squad this year.
He's had a good season
he is in the squad, but he's not had a good season for Wolves this season, really. I mean, Wolves defensively have been pretty poor throughout the majority of this season, but I feel that he suits England's style of play to a T, Connor Cody.
Yeah.
When we play 3 at the back, he commands that defence, really, alongside Mings and Harry Maguire.
Yeah. I'd argue if Southgate's going to insist on 3 centre halves, I don't think we've got a better candidate on all the options we have for England to play in the middle of that back 3 than Connor Cody.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, if we played 4 at the back, I don't think he makes it.
No.
And I'd rather take a player who's used to playing in the back four, again, Lewis Dunk plays in the back three at Brighton.
Yeah.
He'd be perfect again. And I feel it's a shame for him that he's not managed to get that call up yet, because I don't know how old Lewis Dunk is now. Probably in his late 20s. But he is certainly aging, and he's not had the opportunity yet. And it's a shame.
Yeah, I think
29, Lewis Dunk.
It's in a way, it's actually, he's kind of been let down by his teammates in a way, because despite what people believe, there is a bias towards teams higher up the table. And you think there's been a common thing with Brighton, if their strikers scored more goals, they'd be higher up the table. And I think maybe if Brighton were sitting in 10th, 9th or 10th, then I reckon Lewis Dunk would be higher up the pecking order.
I mean,
also there's an unwritten rule in football: if you haven't got like your first cap for your country over a certain age, you're never going to get it.
Yeah.
So at 29, at 29, you're highly unlikely to get picked now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Which is a shame. Which is a shame, because if you're playing well, then you should be in the conversation. But it's not the way it works. Unfortunately, they tend to look at the younger players.
I mean, the point that you made, Rob, is one that I want to back up now. The notes that I wrote down, I simply wrote that Southgate is overlooking the smaller clubs, I think, because you get Eric Dyer, he's played for a Big Six club. How he's got
Big
into
Six, though?
Well,
financially,
theoretically, yes, they are, but this season, no.
But when you
I'll let you have that.
The Big Six was moved away from what used to be the top six. It's now the richest six, effectively, which is why Tottenham is still in it.
I think that Big Six could be a possible discussion for a future week, because I think the Big Six is no more, really. I mean, the performances of Tottenham and Arsenal this season really epitomise that. And the growth of Leicester, the growth of Everton, the growth of West Ham really push Arsenal and Tottenham out there. But that could be a discussion for a future episode, so we'll save that. But going on for other absentees from the England squad, obviously we've got Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who's not got in there yet.
Yeah, should have been in there.
But I feel with Aaron Wan-Bissaka, he may well, now he's not getting in that England squad, he may well choose to play for DR Congo. And I wouldn't blame him, to be honest, because England is spoiled for right backs with Reece James, Kieran Trippier, Alexander-Arnold, who, again, Alexander-Arnold not in the squad.
Yeah.
Well, there's a few English players this week that got called up for Jamaica.
Yeah. Antonio.
Well, Antonio didn't get called up to the squad, but he has switched allegiances and will make himself available for Jamaica.
Yeah.
It's like Axel Tuanzebe, brilliant defender. He may switch his allegiances to DR Congo as well, because he can. That's an option for him.
There's another young player playing for Bayern Munich, Musiala, who's could play for England or Germany, but chose to play for Germany.
Yeah,
I mean, that is a young talent that we aren't getting for the future, and that's a shame, because seeing him playing in Champions League football, he is a star for the future.
I think if I'm going back to Wan-Bissaka, I was just saying to Ben, but off camera, but I think this squad, the fact he's not got into this squad, I think for me is a sign that while Gareth Southgate is manager, he will not play for England. If you look at the moment, like Trent Alexander-Arnold left out perfectly fairly, poor season by his standards. Up until he got injured, he was all right, and he had a month off, and he's just come back, and he's been nowhere near his best. Completely different player. You can't really argue why he's not in there. Reece James,
I think for the time being,
as well. Yeah.
For the time being, Trent Alexander-Arnold should stay well clear of any England team for this foreseeable future, because he's not good enough right now.
I think England squad would head as well.
You've got Tariq Lamptey is a good player. Reece James, Aaron Wan-Bissaka. They're all better than Trent Alexander-Arnold right now. They're all playing better.
Well, I mean, I love Kieran Trippier.
I know you take the injuries are taken into consideration. Yeah, I get that. But if you're up to full match fitness like the other players are, they're playing better.
I mean, I love Kieran Trippier, but I don't think he's worthy of getting in the squad either, because he's aging as well now. He's in his 30s, and there is much better younger right backs for England than Kieran Trippier.
And I love the bloke. Walker's getting on a bit as well.
Yeah, exactly. I love the bloke. I love Kieran Trippier. He's one of my favourite former Burnley players. But he is aging now, and there are much better players that we can have in his place. I mean, there's no questioning. He made literally every single England's fan's summer back in 2018 with that free kick against Croatia.
Because the outcome of that game is not a good one, and I cried.
Yeah, unfortunately, but that moment just made the country go wild, and Kieran Trippier will always be respected for that. But I think time in the England squad has unfortunately come to an end. But he is a Southgate regular. And again, it poses the question: Southgate overlooking the smaller clubs. Atletico Madrid, big club.
Yeah, it's almost like he has his favourites, and he's going to stick with it regardless.
Exactly.
And that sums it up really well. He has his favourites. Mason Mount, although Mason Mount's fully justified. Eric Dyer, Jordan.
He's a favourite, and he's rubbish.
I won't go as far as rubbish. In his England, his club performances have been iffy at best this season.
Yeah, I'm going on his club performances. Yeah.
But you can't fault. He's never done anything wrong for England, Jordan Pickford.
Yeah.
But again, he's a Southgate favourite.
I just want to hop back on the point about Kieran Trippier. That's the point I was going to say with Wan-Bissaka. Obviously, you see the right backs that have been chosen. Kyle Walker's in there, although I'd argue Southgate sees him as more right-sided centre half in recent teams. But Reece James, you can argue. But I say Kieran Trippier, he's been back. He's just served a 3-month ban. He's played about 2 weeks of football in the build-up to this call-up. Wan-Bissaka is having arguably his best season of his career, definitely his best season at Man United. And the fact that he's not got in this squad is why, for me, I think the switch to Congo is likely. But then just pushing on again, the point about favourites is something I've been saying to a lot of my mates this week. That's the thing I do respect Gareth Southgate as England manager, and I always say I always respect him for what he did in 2018. He's really a memory of England's run, but the way he picks his squads for me, obviously he'll go and say that it's on form, when sometimes it is, but like you said, John, sums it up really well. He has his favourites. There's people that if they're fit, they're going to be playing. And no matter whatever their form is, if they are fit and available, like I think Kieran Trippier being in, like you say, he's done really well for England, but like I say, he's just come back from a ban. He's literally just had 3 months of doing nothing, not even training or anything. And he's come back and played 2 weeks. And he's got in the squad ahead of people who are on much better form. And obviously Eric Dyer of a centre-half, we've said enough about just before we go into another rant about that.
Yeah, well, there's one more absentee that I've wrote down, and it's Patrick Bamford. And I think the season he's had for Leeds would be justified of an England call-up.
Yeah. Not for me. Again, it's that unwritten rule: when you're over a certain age and you haven't got a call-up, you're very unlikely to get one.
Well, Bamford's still young. He's still only 25, roughly.
Yeah.
Is he?
I mean, he is. It's just, you assume because Bamford's had that many loan spells, you assume he's a lot older than he is. Yeah. But I think he's only about 25, 26, 27. But I think I'd rather have Ollie Watkins in the squad than Bamford. But again, Bamford could be argued to be in the squad.
Yeah, that's why I think that's the problem. I think that
he's 28 in September.
Well, it's difficult one that. I would rather.
And he also has the option, going on Football Manager, on my save, he's been called up to Ireland. So he has that option of choosing Ireland, just like Wan-Bissaka has the option of choosing Congo. So he can represent Ireland. He's represented them at youth level. So
I have to say, when I first saw the England squad and saw Bamford wasn't in there, I thought that he was injured because I knew he picked up a knock in Leeds' previous game. Obviously, since then, he started and played for Leeds against Fulham, and he scored as well. So
scored and got an assist, yeah.
So originally, that was my logic, was behind this decision. I thought, Bamford's injury must be quite bad, but it clearly isn't. But
we had this conversation in the flat the other day. There's not. If you think of other strikers in front of him, he's not in the reckoning for me. Like, you got Danny Ings, Ollie Watkins, Welbeck.
Yeah.
If you want to put him in this situation, you've got other players in there that do bits.
To be fair though, the only English player to score more goals than Patrick Bamford this season is Harry Kane. So you're getting a proven goal scorer, and obviously in this squad, obviously Euros might be a different story, but in this squad, Danny Ings is obviously currently injured. But I think the debate was always Watkins or Bamford. He was never going to pick both, and I think that's been the problem. And I think I do agree that I would side with you two that Watkins can offer more for a Gareth Southgate team. I think that's the key. I don't know if Patrick Bamford, because he is an out-and-out number 9, where you look at Harry Kane, the most complete striker in
Yeah,
the
he's
world,
not getting
definitely in
ahead
the
of him.
league. Ollie Watkins can offer a lot more other sides of the game, whereas Bamford is purely a finisher, whereas the likes of Ings, Watkins, they suit Gareth Southgate so much better.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like
I-
we was talking about it in the flat the other day, like back in the day, 2000, early 2000 vibes. England didn't have this. England didn't have this struggle with worry of strikers. You know, we knew who we had. We had Michael Owen Esky, Teddy Sheringham off the bench. Now we've got so many. It's a headache for the manager.
Absolutely. Southgate's definitely got his work cut out. But I just want to touch briefly on England before we bring this segment to an end. I mean, realistically, it should be an easy 9 points for us for the World Cup qualifiers, because Poland will be without Lewandowski due to quarantines, because Bayern aren't letting him travel to England because England's on Germany's quarantine list.
Yeah.
And he'll be a big miss for Poland. San Marino and Albania should be fairly easy games.
Yeah, it's like 3 games in 9 days, isn't it?
Yeah. But it should be a fella. England's group, realistically, we should breeze through.
Yeah, and that's a compact schedule due to COVID, isn't it? They're trying to fit as maximum in to try and get it done ahead of the World Cup.
Exactly. And it's the same with Austria as well, because Bayern aren't letting David Alaba travel to Scotland as well.
Yeah.
And I would like to point out, because this is the Winter World Cup, normally with the World Cup being in the summer, the qualifiers end November time. Whereas because it's a Winter World Cup, the qualifiers are going to end in the summer.
Yeah.
So we've got qualifiers in June as well next year. So and then the playoffs will be like September time.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. I'm looking forward to the World Cup and World Cup qualifiers, but I think that is enough for football. And let's move on to topic 2 for this week.
Can I just make one more point before we move on quickly? Obviously, you mentioned the games we have; they're quite easy. For me, I would say I think Gareth probably should have gone more adventurous with this squad. They say the games are easy enough. This is the chance to throw in people who might be uncapped or inexperienced. And definitely in terms of his teams now, obviously he's chosen his squad, but give people like Ward-Prowse games, give Calvin Phillips more game time. Obviously goalkeepers, well, that's going to happen because Pickford's injured. This is the opportunity. This is the chance to test people ahead of the Euros. Who's going to be good enough? And I don't think he's picked a squad that reflects that. I think he's clearly got his squad in his mind.
Absolutely. I'd 100% back that. It's now
to
the
be
time
fair,
for Southgate to mix his squad up.
He would have had his squad set last year going into this, before everything got cancelled, everything got suspended, everything got postponed. He would have had a mindset of who he's picking for the Euros.
Yeah.
And he probably, because of how we know he is, he probably would stick to that.
Yeah, for me, I'm just saying, for me, I think there's in his team selection, he needs to go more so who needs experience ahead of the Euros rather than put the strongest side out possible. And I think he should have done that in his squad as well, but he's missed that chance now. So
precisely. Let's now move on, and we'll dive into topic 2 for this week, which is the development of women's cricket as the World Class Waffle presents cricket.
Oh, what a catch!
And women's cricket is certainly on the rise. There's no question about that. And it's good to see. I mean, the England women are the current one-day international World Cup holders after winning the tournament in 2017 in a home crowd at Lord's. And the squad is going from strength to strength. The ECB are pumping more money into women's cricket, which is fantastic to see. But there's one cricketer in particular that I'd like to focus in on, and it's not an English player. It's actually someone from way down under, and it's Elise Perry, the Australian seam all-rounder. And quite frankly, I think there's any other way I can sum this up, really. She is probably the best all-round female cricketer on the planet right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, you've only got to look at her stats over her career, and certainly justifiable.
100%. And she's essentially Australia's golden girl, really, because I think she's the only ever Australian female to represent the country at a World Cup for football, but also a World Cup for cricket.
Yeah.
I mean, that's talent if ever there was any.
Yeah.
Save some for the rest of us.
But no,
That
women's
reminds me
cricket
of
is
Bo
certainly
Jackson.
rising.
Sorry. It does. It's like multi-talented. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's brilliant to see. Like you don't really see that nowadays. Do you know what I mean? You don't really see people venturing into 2 different sports at the same time. So credit to her athleticism.
Yeah, well, I was fortunate enough to be working at Leicestershire County Cricket Club when the Women's Ashes was on in 2019, and the standard of cricket there was really good. Quite frankly, it was up there with the standard of the males. But should even more funding be available for women's cricket, because it's certainly rising, as is all women's sport.
Yes. I mean, England should be favourites for the postponed World Cup that's going to be taking place next year.
Yeah, it's the World Cup. Well, England have just got back from their tour of New Zealand, where they dominated that series.
Yeah, it was a good series for them.
On New Zealand's excellent playing facilities, which will be
that's the host of the World Cup as well.
Exactly, it'll be a good omen for England, knowing that they can perform well in New Zealand, and it will give them every confidence going into the tournament next summer.
Well, yeah,
trying to defend their crown.
World Cup holders going into a climate and an atmosphere where they know that they can dominate. It should be England as favourites.
And I think they will be. I mean, England are one of the best one-day sides in the country, especially in the women's game. But they prevail more in the longer format, the one-dayers. Australia dominate all the time in the T20s, and they have done for many, many years, especially in the women's game. I mean, backing up the point I was making earlier, I was doing work experience at Leicestershire Cricket Club when England were playing Australia, and Australia looked good. Well, they ripped through the England top order, especially Elise Perry.
Yeah.
Because she is one of the best seam bowlers in the world. And she is an integral, although she may not be the captain of that Australian side, she's definitely an integral part of it. And she can bat, she can bowl, she can field. It's every captain's dream, really.
It'd be good to see how she is in the 100 this summer.
Absolutely, because she has just signed for the Birmingham Thunder, and she won't be the skipper of that team because the captain is the New Zealand captain, Sophie Devine.
Yeah.
But I think she'll be able to thrive in I think the 100, although I'm not really a fan of it, I think it will be a good spectacle, and it will be a good thing for the women's game in particular, because it will help get more women into cricket and get them playing in the shorter formats of the game. Because I'm not a fan of the 100. I don't think we need another short format game. We've got T20s, we've got the 50 over games. We don't really need another one. But
this one sets itself more like IPL with franchise teams, doesn't it? Not necessarily counties.
It's franchising. That's all it is, really. And as Mr. Ian Whittle will always say, the answer to all your questions is money.
Cash is king. Yeah,
cash is king, and this is the prime example of cash being king, because
they had some mad promos, and the amount of money that was spent in these promos last summer advertising the suspended 100, and like the sponsorships that are in the companies that are sponsoring this tournament is ridiculous. The amount of money that's gone into this whole tournament in general, it's quite a lot.
Yeah. I think just while we're talking about money, is like point you were saying earlier, Ben, about funding. I think if the women's game is going to get more funding, then getting younger people to start playing, getting younger girls into cricket in all forms, that's going to be the key to getting more funding for the future. And I think actually having the 100 will help with that.
I think that's something that the ECB do well with their growth of grassroots cricket, especially grassroots women's cricket, because I know they try and, from my personal experiences within cricket, they do try and get the young talents and promote them through, try and get them into Loughborough as quickly as they can, because that's where the main ECB training centre is, at Loughborough University, and try and get them developed as quickly as possible so they can get into the England first team, because I know the England women's first 11 is very young.
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah, I'm not the most knowledgeable about cricket, but I do believe you're right in that, in what I do know.
It's good to see. I think it's really good to see the growth of the women's game and the way it's progressing, because I think one of these days it will. Well, even if it's not now, I think it'll be on a par with the men's game, because there is the growth there, and the growth is obvious.
So definitely the audience is definitely growing. Like, you only have to look at the World Cup in 2017 that we mentioned. Like, they sold out Lords when they got to the final. I mean, would the women's team have done that 5-10 years ago? Well, I mean, before the final, obviously. Would they have done that in 2010, those sort of years earlier than that? Probably not. So there is definitely massive growth, and obviously it's pushed on from strength from there, because as in any sport, if you see England do well, whether it's a men's team or women's team or a mixed team or whatever, if England do well, then the audience starts moving towards that, because they're like, oh, we're good at this, I might start following it. And that's really boosted women's cricket from the England point of view, obviously.
Again, backing up the point you just made, when I was at Leicestershire, for example, the club hosted 2 of the Women's Ashes game. I mean, don't get me wrong, Leicestershire's ground's not the biggest in the country. In fact, I think it's actually the smallest, but it's sold out.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely packed, and the atmosphere was really good. But there's many topics that I'd like to bring into this, which we probably haven't got time for today. But it's one that's been going around my head for a while, because obviously the Barmy Army is the main supporter group for the men's team. Should they be getting more involved with the women's side as well?
Yeah,
arguably, I think they definitely should.
That's 100%.
But we may have this discussion on a deeper scale in further weeks, because I know we're pushing for time on this particular call, so we will have to switch to another one. But no, just to summarise it, I think women's cricket is definitely rising in this country and further afield. I mean, for example, in India, it's very, very, very high growth. I mean,
incredible.
Cricket is the national sport of India. There's no question about that.
Yeah,
and it is certainly progressing.
I think it's right, like you say.
Funding is a good thing. Like, the more funding they get, the better facilities they get. They get the better chance of the players getting better with better equipment and everything else. Like, it can only be a good thing.
Yep, absolutely.
And the audience will grow, obviously, over the course of the 100 as well. When you keep getting the top women's players in the game at the moment, they come play over in England, get an English audience growing, and that will grow. That will help boost women's cricket in England. Like, getting people like Elise Perry and Sophie Devine and people like that will then help boost the audience and boost the appeal to the English fans. Hopefully, like you say, hopefully more and more of the Barmy Army will start showing their support to the women's team, and we can get even more growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say let's bring cricket to an end, and we'll move on to our next topic, as the World Class Waffle now presents rugby. So the World Class Waffle now presents rugby, and we're going to be talking all things Six Nations. And this campaign has been like no other, obviously, because of COVID. We've seen some sides do particularly well, sometimes some sides doing particularly badly, England. But
It's been abysmal.
It's been shoddy to say the least. But we're coming down to the final game of the campaign, happening next Friday, with France's rearranged game against Scotland. And there is a lot riding on that game, with France, if they get a bonus point win over Scotland, they win the Six Nations. I think if I've done it, if I've done the maths right.
If they need to better the points difference of Wales as well. So
they need a bonus point win and basically to tonk Scotland.
Yeah, they need to beat Scotland by 20 points to go past Wales, or surpass Wales' point difference and be champions. Obviously, Wales, the side who had the opportunity to take the Grand Slam yesterday, but were then stopped by France.
Bottled it in overtime.
Yep. 14-man France as well.
But I want to focus more specifically on Wales, if we can. Yeah. I mean, obviously, they've got a new coach in Wayne Pivac, who's replaced Warren Gatland as head coach of Wales, as Gatland is now solely the coach of the British Irish Lions.
Yeah.
But many doubted Pivac at first, as some of the performances and his style of play weren't particularly to many Welsh fans' liking. But the 2026 Nations has certainly shown that he has certainly rallied the troops and has Wales. It's difficult with Wales because I saw a column written by Matt Dawson, the former England rugby player, who said Wales are not fully there yet. There's no question they've got lucky at times during this campaign with some of the officiating decisions that have been made, specifically in the Wales-England game where the French referee bottled it. I mean, I know that's very opinionated, but
no,
it's the truth.
You're stating facts, mate. Don't worry about that.
But no, Wayne Pivac has certainly rallied the troops, and I didn't actually watch the game yesterday, Wales-France game. I only caught the last 5 minutes, but it was certainly a good game. There's no question about that. There's 2 points in it, both sides getting bonus points, but they've certainly rejuvenated themselves, Wales, and some of the young talent that's coming through. For example, I've written down Lewis Rees-Zammit, who is certainly a star in the making. I mean, there's no question I had to research all this because
I watched the game against Scotland and he scored 2 tries. He is rapid.
He is very, very quick. I mean, I know me and Rob aren't very big rugby fans. I don't know about you, John, but
I don't mind rugby.
It's a sport that I wouldn't normally look at, and one that I'd normally pass at if given the opportunity. But yesterday would have given Alan Wynne-Jones, the Welsh captain, the opportunity to be part of a possible 4 Grand Slams. Obviously, that's not the case now because Wales can't get the Grand Slam. But he's certainly a Welsh legend, Alan Wynne-Jones. But let's just dive away from Wales and we'll summarise each team's campaigns, really. Let's start from the bottom of the table. And poor old Italy. I mean,
same as always,
are they ever going to do well, really?
No, they're not.
It's
probably not.
It's a very sorry state for Italy because they're just not really very competitive. I mean, they joined the Six Nations. They were the last team to join the Six Nations back in '96, I think, when it was just the 5 nations. But they've never really competed, and the number of wins they've got is probably below 20. I mean, I don't know for a fact, but every time I've seen Italy play, they just don't look competitive. I mean, yesterday, even Scotland thrashed them.
Yeah, but Scotland are on the rise.
Scotland are on the rise.
Nations.
Scotland are definitely on the rise, and we'll come to them in a moment. But the next team above Italy is a sorry state for England. I mean, they've had a very, very poor campaign.
They've had an abysmal campaign, one to forget, 100%.
And they do look set to finish 5th, depending on Scotland's result against France. I mean, it would take France, again, England will finish 4th if France tonk Scotland and then France win the Six Nations. But England have lost 3 out of their 5 games in this year's Six Nations. I mean, they beat Italy and France. I mean, there's no question the France performance is the England we all know and the England that can play very, very well. But yesterday against Ireland, they were abysmal. I mean, they were playing against 14 men for the majority of the game and got tongued.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, there's a few question marks over the Wales game. Should some of the decisions have been well, made a bit better. Like you say, you said the French referee bottled it. I think that's a nice way of saying it. I think that's the way you wanted to phrase it. So you didn't have to get the note out, probably. But
Yeah,
I think that one you could maybe argue could have been a win, but the other two have just been terrible performances, and like you say, far from the England we've come to expect.
I think
Yeah,
essentially
this is
for
definitely
England,
one to forget.
I think essentially for England, they just need to reset now. They need to completely reset. Eddie Jones needs to change some of the style of, well, I wouldn't even say the style of how England play. I mean, I'm no rugby tactician and I know very little about rugby. But England just need to reset. They need to go again. I don't know. Well, there's the 2023 World Cup coming up in 2 years' time, and that's got to be a focus for them. And they've got to arguably do a better performance for this year's Six Nations, which will be happening later on in the year. But yeah, essentially, England just need to reset themselves because the good performances have been very good, but the bad performances have been pretty shoddy.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's all about resetting. And next we'll go to Scotland. I mean, the notes I've wrote is essentially Scotland may not care where they finished as they beat England.
That's all they care about every year. The Calcutta Cup, that's what they want to win.
Yeah,
exactly. That's pretty much everything on Scotland's
mind. And to be fair, it's been a bad bit for the England as being champions, like, you know, title holders. Like, they're just the way that Scotland played against England, fair play to them.
I mean, like you said a minute ago, John, it has been a more promising campaign for Scotland. Yes. They have played some good rugby, and they do look a stronger side than they would have done in previous campaigns. And I think they got to the last eight. I think they got to the last eight in Japan in 2019. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
I can't remember.
It's that long ago, and I didn't really pay that much attention to it. But Scotland is definitely on the rise, and I think they probably could put in a better campaign at the 2023 World Cup. I don't know where that's happening. I'd imagine is it France?
Yeah.
There we go. But I'd say they'd be able to do a better performance there. There's no question that they can't.
In terms of this campaign as well, the jury's still kind of out on Scotland, because if they go and beat France, then you'd say it's a highly successful campaign. If they lose, and you say, well, there's progress, I suppose. Can they push on?
Yeah, I think if Scotland do beat France, they go third, just below Wales and above Ireland. And I'd say that's a good campaign for Scotland. I mean, a lot of English people have mixed views on the Scots. They have mixed views on the Welsh, as is the conflict of interest in this country. But in terms of rugby's a nice sport. Fans get along. It's not like football where you see all this nonsense and stuff and hooliganism. But it's good to see that Scotland are doing well in rugby, because they've had it tough and they've bounced back and they're now on the up again, I'd say. I mean, again, as I keep reiterating, I'm no rugby fan, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they come in the Autumn Nations Cup, which is the one that happens later on in the year, because I think with COVID, they pushed back.
They pushed back last season's campaign.
Last year's one, but I think they predominantly want it to stick how it has been. I mean, I believe 2022 Six Nations will be in February, but they've also introduced a new tournament called the Autumn Nations Cup, which is like a Six Nations style tournament with more teams. Predominantly, it gets run on Amazon Prime. That's where you can find it. But yeah, that's the autumn tournament. It'd be good showing for them, coming into that one, especially with teams like Georgia and lesser teams like that. They should be getting the wins.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just summarise the last two teams quickly. Ireland again have had a very mixed campaign. They've had some good results.
England.
They did beat England very convincingly with 14 men. But it's the end of the Andy Farrell era for Ireland.
Yeah.
He's been a good coach for the Irish in particular, taking them to Six Nations glory in the past, and also taking them to a semi-final of the World Cup, which is certainly something to be cherished. And Irish rugby is probably the national sport in that country, arguably. Who knows? I'm not Irish, and I know if Harry was on here, he'd certainly be having his say on the Irish.
Probably, yeah.
But let's just summarise quickly with France. They've looked very strong at times. They look very dangerous. And if they tonk Scotland, they'll win the Six Nations. Pretty much well summarised there.
Yeah, I
Pretty
think
much in a nutshell.
So I think France is definitely. I think whatever happens in the final game, they'll be happy with the way they performed over the course of the campaign. And obviously, I think how well they played so far, you can't rule it out. It might seem unlikely. Obviously, they need the bonus point, which for anyone who doesn't know how they get that, you have to get 4 tries. And obviously, it was actually 21 points, not 20. 20 would level with Wales, so it's actually 21-point win they would need. And you can't rule it out because, like I said, they've got so much more to play for than Scotland going into it, and it'll be how they handle the pressure. Obviously, Wales had the pressure on them in the previous game when France beat them. Obviously, the pressure was all on Wales, and France got the performance done. But now the pressure will be on the French themselves, and we'll see how they handle that.
Another thing with France, though, they had a COVID outbreak in their camp, which makes it even more impressive that they've done so well because they've had reduced training.
This is why this game is going last.
Yeah,
because they called it off at the last minute after staff. They found out 11 players and 5 staff got COVID.
Makes it even more special for France, really, that they've done so well this campaign, and they will certainly take confidence in their home World Cup in 23, for sure.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they, after doing so well in the Six Nations? But that's our pretty tragic rugby summary brought to an end. It's not a sport that we talk about much, but if there's a story to be told, we will take the opportunity. And we've done that here.
No, if we're being truly honest, the plan was to talk about Wales winning the Grand Slam, but they didn't.
Yeah.
That was the original plan. It was going to be a congratulations to Wales, but that didn't quite go to plan, did it?
To be fair, we have our planning meeting and we have a list of topics, and that was on there. Yeah, Wales Grand Slam. That obviously didn't happen last night, so we adapt and adjust and move on.
Yep, indeed. And there's topics that I have in mind, possibly for next week. I mean, what's the date next week? It's the 29th, I think, when this will go out, roughly.
Yep, 29th, yeah.
So that will be a week before the Masters Golf. So that will be good to look ahead to that, possibly. That could be one that we do next week. We could also, I think we probably want to stray away from football for a week, maybe just 1 week, and then come back to it in a week.
Well, we'll see, won't we?
We'll see what news comes out. So,
we'll see what happens in the world of sport in 7 days.
Yeah,
that's the problem. That's the thing with sport. You can never plan too far ahead because something massive could happen in the week.
Exactly.
Yeah, Wales not winning the Grand Slam. We was all set for that.
Yeah.
And we've had to change it last minute.
You can never predict sport, can you?
Backing up a topic that me and Rob spoke about last week, Dr. Richard Freeman. He's now been banned from the UK medicine
he's been struck off, hasn't he?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I know for a fact that John hasn't listened to last week's episode yet.
No, I've been very busy.
Disappointing.
Sorry,
I've been very busy catching up with my work. It's been a very tough week.
Work is priority. We'll allow it.
Despite John might not have listened to it, but we've actually been really pleased with how that's performed last week's episode. So a big thank you for the support over the last week.
Absolutely. Yeah, it has been our best performing one on YouTube so far. And we'll look to continue that going forward. I mean, we've certainly got big plans for the future. Those plans which will be released in future weeks in due course, as we have, well, I say it's big plans, it's big plans. Exciting times here at the podcast. But I think we can bring episode 16 to an end. Thank you very much for listening. Take care and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.